helping someone on life's way. From the paths of sin, bring the wonders into the Master's fold to stay. Help to cheer the lone and sad. Help to make some pilgrim glad. Let your light so be that all the world may see the joy of serving Jesus with a smile. Are you giving to the world a smile? Help and lessen someone's weary mile. Do you greet the world with song as through life you pass along, cheering those you meet along life's way? Well, give the world a smile each day, helping someone on life's way. From the paths of sin, bring the wonders into the Master's fold to stay. Help to cheer the lone and sad. Help to make some pilgrim glad. Let your light so be that all the world may see the joy of serving Jesus with a smile. Thursday evening, everybody. Chris McDonald back with you for our end of the week broadcast on the McFiles on this Thursday night. I was debating on what we were going to do tonight, and I had given some thought to just coming on myself and rambling for a little bit, and decided against that because we interviewed Bill Federer today, and knowing what's coming up this month, we're not going to have a lot of space to air this if we don't do it tonight. And I wanted to let him come on and talk to you tonight. It's a pre-recorded interview, and we're going to shut the chat down during the interview, and then we'll open it back up after the interview's done. But we want you to listen both on Facebook and our e-network tonight. We're not aired on the Faith Network. We may upload it later to the Faith. But he's going to be talking about a very important subject, and it's going to have a very interesting take on it tonight. We're going to be dealing with the French Revolution and how France has caved to the Muslim pressure, and how her history was rooted in an effort by this revolution that it took place. France's revolution took place roughly about 10 to 12 years after ours in 1776. France, I think it was 1788, 1992, when that general time frame into the mid-1790s, and millions, thousands, hundreds of thousands at least, went to the death in this bloodletting by the government. But at the heart of this revolution was an effort to de-Christianize France, and they're reaping a price for it tonight because the Muslim situation has gotten so out of hand. They're having riots over there. Macron don't know what to do about it. But the bigger picture discussion tonight will turn to America, because we're facing the same danger. I will address that after the show a little bit on an afterthought. But without further ado, I'm going to let my dear friend Bill Federer speak to you tonight. No chatting. I want you to listen intently. Don't be a distraction. All moderators, affirmations only, and I prefer them not even affirm. I would prefer people listen, and they need to listen intently to what he's got to say tonight, and I hope you'll enjoy the interview. I'll be back, and we'll take some questions and some interaction with you after the show. But during the interview, please no chatting, paragraphs, links, or whatever. And we'd appreciate you doing that for us tonight. And we will be back after the show because we do have a few things we want to share with you tonight on the Afterthought. So here's Bill Federer tonight, special McFiles Thursday night guest. I told you we had a surprise in the works this week, and he is our surprise. You're going to be blessed. He's always a blessing to us. He's no different tonight. He's going to knock your socks off. Here's Bill Federer from AmericanMinute.org. Enjoy the show. Enjoy the interview. We'll be back after this. And good evening, everybody. Chris McDonald with you on the special McFiles special program tonight. It's always good to have old friends with us and regular guests that have been with us a lot. And this man is always a blessing to us. And my dear friend, got to meet him for the first time a few months ago over in Nashville. And William Federer, AmericanMinute.org. We're so grateful that he's with us today. And he is absolutely my favorite guest because of several reasons. But I'm a history buff, and I could just sit and listen to him I can sit and listen to you for 24 hours and I wouldn't be bored. So I can only imagine those that have that privilege to do that at the house. But good to see you, buddy. Bill Federer, everybody. Got my tongue tied there. It's good to see you tonight. How are you, sir?
Oh, Chris, great to be with you.
It's good to be with you. I wanted to bring you on. This is July still, and we are a few weeks removed from July 4th, Independence Day. But I noticed, on your page, I get your updates, the email updates, and really enjoy those. And encourage people to go to his website, sign up for those. It's a good history lesson for you and deep stuff. But I found it's intriguing that we're honoring our Independence Day, and a lot of people don't realize that the French Revolution took place somewhat in the same general time frame. France is going up in smoke right now with a lot of these protests. And I was just wanting to bring you on tonight, sort of talk about the correlation maybe between the two revolutions and where we're at today with this. And French people, they've always been a weird bunch because they passively supported the Allies in the war until the Nazis invaded them. And all of a sudden, they became friends of America and Britain. But they've been sort of a chameleon as far as relations with America go through the years. And but they're experiencing a very weird uprising right now. And I'm just curious from a historian's standpoint what you see about that and think. And we'll talk about some other things. But it is our Revolution Month. This is when America got her freedom, isn't it?
Well, it is. And I've written quite a bit on France. It was King Clovis in 497 AD that was the king of the Franks, and he converted and got baptized with thousands of his soldiers. And so that's when France became Christian. But over the years, you had it invaded by the Vikings. And so that was Normandy, was sort of the middle northern area of France that was controlled by these Vikings who later intermarried and became Christian Vikings. We call them Norsemen or Normans. So William the Norman was this Viking that had been in France, that had been Christianized, and then invaded England and captured it in 1066 AD. It gets interesting when you get there's hundreds of years between England and France over this land, but when you get into the 1500s, you have Francis I of France, and he is captured by the King of Spain, Charles V, who keeps him in prison for half a year and gets him to agree to give up some land. And then Francis I gets out and goes over to the Ottoman Empire and makes a treaty with the Turks against Spain. And so this is called the Franco-Ottoman treaties. And there's quite a number of them over the next several centuries. And many of the countries in Europe wanted to excommunicate France because it's like you're making a deal with the devil over against Spain by going to the Turks. But it went on even during the French Revolution period. Napoleon was going to be sent over to the Ottoman Empire to help them to upgrade their artillery. And that was the greatest skill that Napoleon had, is artillery, and that's cannons on wheels. And so imagine if all of Napoleon's military expertise was given to the Ottoman Empire. But Napoleon, to his credit, refused and even resigned from the military. And he had a person intercede, got him back into the military. Meanwhile, the French Revolution takes place. And you had the royalists who supported the king, and then the what later got called Jacobins, and they met on a street called Jacob, and they were the BLM Antifa of the day.
Wow.
So imagine if the BLM and Antifa actually got their way and tore down and burnt everything. Well, that's what happened in France. Robespierre was the head of the Antifa, so to speak, and they decided that terror by the government was the best way to get a country to give up its faith in, you're right, it was Catholic, but to give up its faith and panic and surrender to the new secular government. And so Robespierre even gave a speech in the 1790s called Terror Justified. And he says, terror is nothing more than swift, severe, indomitable justice, that the form of government in a revolution is terror. So, I mean, could you imagine the government planning terrorist attacks on their own people?
Yeah.
And so this is what Robespierre, and every day he'd come into the French assembly and pull out a list of people that were disloyal to the new French Republic, and they would be arrested and have their heads chopped off. 30,000 of them. They even invented a nice, clean head chopping off machine called the guillotine. And so you had royalists in France that were not liking this new French secular republic, and they're marching down the street, and they get Napoleon, this young artillery officer, to fire his cannons full of grape shot, which is small pieces of metal, into this crowd, and it just mows them all down, like just instantly kills like thousands of them. And of course, Napoleon reportedly said that he used a whiff of grape shot to get rid of these people. Well, then Napoleon claimed to be not feeling well. And so they sent another general to the Vendée, which is a rural area of royalists. And this general killed an estimated 300,000 men, women, and children in the Vendée. It's considered the first modern genocide.
Yes.
That you could actually have a government killing hundreds of thousands of its own people because they don't want to go along with this new secular order. And then the French Revolution decided to de-Christianize their country. And they not only wanted to get rid of the year, right, done in the year of the Lord, 1792. They didn't like that. So they made 1792 the new year one of the Republic. And then year two and year three, and they used it for about a dozen years. And they said that 10 was the number of man. And so they got rid of a 7-day week, and they came up with a 10-day week. And they call it a decade week. And they rearranged it so every day had 10 hours. And every hour had 100 minutes, and every minute had 100 seconds. I mean, it was just crazy, but they did it. And they renamed their months, and they said 10 was the number of man because you counted on 10 fingers. And so they went through everything in France and made every measurement divisible by 10, right? Liquids and distances and weights and everything. And they called it the metric system. Maybe that's why I never really liked the metric system.
Amen.
And then you had these nuns that wouldn't go along with this new secular order. And the nuns were the ones that ran the hospitals. Matter of fact, it was the Catholic Church that more or less invented hospitals. In the Middle Ages, people would go on pilgrimages to the Holy Land, and they would show up, they're worn out. And so the decision was made that every place people were making a pilgrimage to, they should have an infirmary. And so originally, when the Middle East was still Christian until Islam came along, you would have these Christians and would have orders of, people taking care of these travelers. And so the Latin name for traveler or pilgrim is hosp. HOSP. That's where you get the word hospitality and hospital. And so you have these ladies, and even in the New Testament, it says, don't take a widow into your number of widows unless they have reputation for washing the saints' feet, right, and caring for the people in need and so forth. And so you'd have these ladies that dedicated their lives to taking care of these pilgrims coming to the Holy Land. And then when the Muslims came along and started attacking, they had to have a security force, and so they were called Knights Hospitaller. And so they were the ones defending that. But it was basically the Christians that came up with the hospitals. And these nuns had started hospitals, hundreds of them all across Europe. Even during the Crimean War in the 1850s, Florence Nightingale, one of the nursing pioneers, says there's no training better than that of a Catholic nun, right? So nuns were synonymous with nurses. And even so much that the nurse's hat, that distinctive little bonnet that they would wear, was borrowed from the nun's habit, or the nuns had that hat, right? And anyway, during the French Revolution, these nuns wouldn't give up their faith, and so they lined them up and they marched them toward the guillotine. And they were singing Psalms 117, and they would chop a head off. There'd be one less person singing. Chop another head off, one less person singing. Chop another head off. They chopped off all their heads till nobody else is singing. They literally wanted to de-Christianize all of France. And now, Plato talked about that democracy without morals and virtue ends in chaos, out of which a tyrant arises. That's sort of the standard understanding of history, that when you have chaos, everybody panics and they want someone to restore order, and that's when a dictator seizes power.
Right.
And so if you want to be a dictator, you first want to sow chaos and then get everybody into a panic mode. And then when they're in this panic mode, they say, we need somebody to come along and restore order. And it's like, I've been waiting for you to ask. Here I am, but I got to take away all your freedoms and all your rights and everything. And so in this chaos of France, chopping off all these heads, they need somebody to come along and restore order, and they get Napoleon. And now it's interesting, Napoleon, during this period of the French Revolution in 1798, went to Egypt and captured it. And Egypt had been sort of a backwash of the Ottoman Empire. And so Napoleon's able to conquer for a month or two before, the Ottoman Turkish Empire even knows what's going on. And Napoleon would say, well, I'm sort of like a Muslim. I've torn down churches. And so we're sort of like, and they're like, yeah, but you don't act like a Muslim. And he even paid to build a couple mosques, and he did introduce the printing press into Egypt, and he had archaeologists that discovered the pyramids and the Rosetta Stone. And so in the 800s, when Islam came into Egypt, they destroyed every monument and destroyed the pyramids and raided them. Why? Because they were pagan and they had gold. And so for centuries, they forgot the Egyptian language of Coptic. And so they would have these pyramids with these Egyptian hieroglyphs, and nobody could read them. Well, Napoleon's men found the Rosetta Stone, and they saw that there was something written in Greek, and then sort of a middle type of language they knew a little of, and then the Egyptian hieroglyphics. And so this was studied, and they go, okay, we know what the Greek says, and we can sort of figure out what this, and then we can sort of figure out what and that they unlocked the hieroglyphs for the first time in over 1,000 years. They could finally read what's on these Egyptian pyramids. And anyway, so Napoleon is there. He does march to the Holy Land, and he's going to recapture that, but he's not able to take the city of Accra, and he has to retreat. And then when there's enough of confusion going on in Paris because of all the chopping off of the heads, Napoleon sort of leaves his second in command in charge, and he gets on a boat, goes back to Paris, and literally makes himself an emperor. He calls himself the first citizen, but he's an emperor. And then he has his army invade Rome and arrest the Pope and capture the Pope. And the Pope dies in captivity. And Napoleon waits like 6 months to bury the Pope until the church agrees to make some concessions and gives him some land. And then the next Pope, he captures him. And he is trying to get him to give up some land, and there's going to be a coronation ceremony, and the Pope's there. Well, normally, if the Pope's there, he's the one who puts the crown on the king's head. And it goes all the way back to 800 AD when the Pope crowned Charlemagne, the defender of the Holy Roman Empire. Well, right in front of the Pope, Napoleon takes the crown and puts it on his own head.
Wow.
And then takes the crown and puts it on Josephine, his wife's head. And sort of like, take that, Pope. I mean, and then he has that Pope in captivity, and that Pope excommunicates Napoleon. And so now you got a dilemma going on, and that's when Spain decides it has a problem. So Napoleon invades Spain, what's called the Peninsula War. And he has trouble putting down these Spanish. So what does he do? He leans upon that Franco-Ottoman treaty, and he gets a bunch of Muslims on cavalry and brings them into Spain and has them ride their horses into the crowd with their scimitar swords and butchers thousands of them. And then when Napoleon forces the King Ferdinand IV, or whatever his name is, to resign, abdicate, he puts his brother Joseph on the throne of Spain. Well, now you have a dilemma, because all of New Spain, which is, western parts of America and Mexico and Colombia and Guatemala and Costa Rica and Panama and all these other countries, is called New Spain. And you have a guy named Simon Bolivar. And he's like, why should we be loyal to the Spanish throne with a French guy on it, Joseph Bonaparte, whose brother Napoleon's excommunicated by the Pope? And so Simon Bolivar begins this, he's considered sort of like the George Washington of Central and South America, Simon Bolivar. So he helps get all of that area to break away from the Spanish throne, sort of like George Washington had America break away from the English throne. But where, George Washington didn't lust for power, and he served 2 terms as president and then stepped down, Simon Bolivar wanted to make himself president for life, which some of these other different countries said, no, we don't like that. And the whole thing fell apart. It was going to be called Grand Colombia, but it fell apart. And so now they have all these other different countries. But
interrupt you a minute and ask you a question. Napoleon, was he part of this campaign to de-Christianize France, or was he more of a military conqueror? Did he really care about religion? Because I've heard mixed stories about that through the years. And did he seek to eradicate Christianity, the dictator? Because he became the dictator you're describing. He literally became the man out of chaos. But did he carry on this crusade? Because the Pope seemed that was look, I'm not Catholic, but it was still a slap at faith when you get down to it, because that was Francis' faith. And was he that way, or was there something I'm missing here?
Yeah, he was not an ideological warrior wanting to eradicate Christianity. He was a military political strategist, gotcha. And he saw where necessary, he would ban the Catholic Church, and other places, if he saw it was useful to him, he could twist some arms and manipulate it. And he decided to invade Russia. And he is marching in with 500,000 men. And 6 months later, comes out with 50,000. It's like, whoa, how do you lose that many men in 6 months? Well, he did it, right? So the Russians retreated and did not fight Napoleon. And they burnt all their fields and farms in front of his army, so there was no food to live off of. And when they get to Moscow, it's empty. It's empty of people, and it's empty of supplies. There's nothing there. And Napoleon's got this army like, okay, who do I fight? Who do I make surrender to me? And it's like, nobody can be found. And so then the Russian winter starts to set in, and his generals say, we ought to think about getting back to France. And instead of taking a different route, Napoleon retraces his steps across the burnt out area. And then the blizzards hit, and then the Russians attack. And then there's the terrible battle of the Berezina River. if I'm pronouncing that correct, but Napoleon, for some inexplicable reason, crosses the river first. And then when these Russians are attacking in this blizzard, Napoleon's on the wrong side of the river. He can't even give orders to his troops, and he's just on the other side watching them get slaughtered and slaughtered and slaughtered and slaughtered until and so he has to just retreat back to Paris with his 50,000.
Wow.
And the story is that he told the drummer to play retreat, and the little drummer boy said, I don't know how to play that. In other words, up to this point, it was always, charge, go forward. But here's the boy. He retreats, goes back to Paris, and he's forced by the other countries of Europe to abdicate. They didn't defeat him, but and so he voluntarily agreed to be banished to the island of, I think it was Corsica in the Mediterranean Sea. And he's there for about a year. And if you've ever saw the movie with Jim Caviezel, it's a great movie called Count of Monte Cristo.
Yes.
It picks up with Napoleon escaping from that island and then marching back toward Paris. And some soldiers stop him. And Napoleon's like on his horse, and he's like, "What? Are you going to shoot your general?" And these guys are like, "Well, I'm not going to shoot Napoleon." "Well, I'm not going to shoot Napoleon." It's like, "Okay, well, if you're not going to shoot me, join me." And so they say, "Well, okay." And so then they join him, and then they meet another group of soldiers, and they're supposed to say, "Stop." And he said, "What, are you going to shoot Napoleon?" So, "I'm not going to shoot Napoleon." Well, and then he goes, "Well, if you're not going to shoot me, join me." And by the time he gets back to Paris, he's reassembled an enormous army. And all of Europe is now in panic. And it's called the 100 Days. So he's got 100 days now, and it's building up to the Battle of Waterloo. And this is an enormous battle. So you got the French with like 100,000 troops. And then you have the Prussians, which is part of Germany, and then the English and, the Dutch, couple other countries. And Napoleon is moving all of his artillery around, and he's ready for the great day of battle. But then it starts pouring down drenching rain. His cannons get stuck in the mud. His horses get stuck in the mud. He can't move around like he was expecting. And this time he gets defeated.
Yeah.
And now he's banished to the island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic. And there's no land within 1,000 miles in any direction.
No escaping from there.
And he's only like, I think 56, if I remember correctly. And so the British have a ship that just goes in circles around that little island day and night, so nobody can get him. And at that point, Napoleon begins to reflect on his life. He asks the now new Pope for a chaplain, and they send over someone, and then he gets a Bible and he reads through the Bible, and he's there with a couple of his generals, and he recites to the generals like his views of the gospel. And he would make statements like, Jesus is not a man. He goes, I'm a commander. Napoleon was a commander. Alexander the Great was commander, and we had men obey us out of fear. And Jesus has millions that will obey him out of love. Beautiful. And he says that the Bible is not a book written by man. He says it's a living being, it's a living entity. It's, and he would make these statements that you get the impression that he's discovering faith. And then he dies. And then you go back to France, and so they've been beaten down quite a bit. They still have a large global empire, parts of India, parts of Africa, parts of some islands in Indonesia and so forth, and it really the chessboard of Europe sort of gets rearranged with the period of industrialization. And so at that point, Britain goes from being this forever enemy to Germany becomes the enemy. And you build up to World War I. but that's another story. I don't know how much we're doing time wise.
I just want to, what I want to segue to is in light of what you just described, because the French has been a tumultuous country, and our revolution sort of paralleled theirs a few years before, 20 years before. So, but what you're seeing going on in Europe now with this upheaval, with France going through this very same thing, do you see any parallels between what's happening there with Macron right now and what happened back in the 1700s, early 1800s? Because, and there's a reason why I'm doing this tonight, because it speaks to the unrest and I think there's a great effort to de-Christianize this country that's similar to what the French did back then, because we're seeing the same thing, Bill, in many ways. We got a tyrannical government. We've got groups like BLM, Antifa. We've got groups that want to eradicate faith off the landscape of this country. And our nation, and I vehemently disagree with the former Mr. Obama that claimed we were not a Christian nation. We are a Christian nation. We were founded on Judeo-Christian principles, and God was the force behind this, but he himself is trying to be, the country at large, the forces that be, are trying to eradicate him from everything. Very similar to what you just described, the French tried to do up until through Napoleon's life. Do you see the same parallel? Do you see anything different with what's happening now and then, or what's your take as a historian on all that?
Right. So drive neutral reverse. So Europe, especially France, went from a Judeo-Christian France with Notre Dame Cathedral and 1,000 years of Catholic churches to a neutral, to a secular France.
That's correct.
Whereas free sex, anything goes. Right. It's you don't get your rights from a creator. You get your rights from the collective, the group, the social contract, the social compact. And so you go from a Judeo-Christian France to a secular France. And now the secularism has opened the door toward socialism and radical Islam.
Bingo.
And so you have the number one name for newborns in Europe is Mohammed. And the second most common name is another Muslim name. And the third one is right. And so because they has said there's nothing special about the Christian past, it's all equal, it's all the same. And so they let in. And it's one of these things where the secular mind can't comprehend this. There's a discussion between Richard Dawkins and the other famous atheist. The name escapes me right now. But they were having one of these discussions, and they were talking about how they wanted to get rid of all these Judeo-Christian, values. And then they pause, and the one says, did it ever occur to us that maybe by tearing down Christianity, we're going to open the door to radical Islam?
Absolutely.
And they just sort of pause there, and then like the interview ends, and it's like, yeah, there is no, it doesn't stay balanced in a vacuum. Something's going to get sucked into it. And so when they get done de-Christianizing, into it comes all kinds of different sexual views. And then it becomes more anarchistic, and there's no borders, there's no guidelines, there's who can say what's right and what's wrong. It's only wrong if you get caught. And then you have a lot of these Islamic immigrants come in. Many of them are moderate, and they just want to enjoy the freedoms of a Western country as compared to where they came from. And others feel it's their duty to have the Western world actually become Islamic.
Wow.
And so it is I wrote a whole book on the history of Islam, where I go through that Islam means submission, and a Muslim is one who has submitted, and they think there'll be world peace when the whole world has submitted to the will of Allah. And so to them, world peace means world Islam. Now, a moderate, peaceful Muslim thinks the world is going to submit to Allah later, maybe in the distant future, maybe at the end of the world, maybe it's even figurative. And since it's so far off, they really don't think about it. They just want to live their lives, have their family, and that's fine. And they're enjoyable neighbors. But then there's others that think the world is supposed to submit to Allah now, and they're really excited. They want to help make it happen. And the dilemma for the West is the more the West shows itself nice and tolerant, the fundamental ones view that niceness and tolerance as weakness.
Weakness.
And to the fundamental Muslims, they have this concept. It's a military concept. When your enemy is strong, retreat. When your enemy is weak, attack. It's pretty much the law of the jungle, right? You know, the weak animal will run away from the strong animal, but if the strong animal is injured and limping around, well, then all the hyenas will gather on and get him, you know. And so if you show weakness, that's a signal that calling for attack. And so in the West, when they bend over backwards to show themselves tolerant, and now one of the things when the fundamentalists, Muslims, the term that has been used recently to explain them are called Islamists. Islamists. So when these Islamists would conquer a country, the people they conquer were forbidden to insult them. It's actually the death penalty if you insult them. And so when they come into a Western country and the Western country bends over backwards not to insult them, they view that as the Western country submitting to them, having surrendered. When the Islamists conquer a country, if you're walking down the street and you're an infidel, you are supposed to get off the sidewalk and let them pass. If you're going into a door, the infidel is supposed to hold open the door for the Islamist. If there's not enough chairs, you're supposed to stand up and give them your chair. And so things in the West that we take as normal politeness, they take that as us acknowledging that we have surrendered to them. And this is an emboldening thing. And so in their concept is when your enemy shows weakness, that is Allah indicating to you to conquer them. And I actually talked to a Muslim terrorist who became a Christian, Kamal Salim. He's an author of several books, just a dynamic person. And but he says that when they even sense that you're afraid of them, they take that as an indication from Allah that they're supposed to attack you. Right. And so that's why over and over again, the Bible says, fear not, don't be afraid, don't, right. And so if they sense that you're afraid of them, they sense that that is an indicator from their Allah that they're supposed to attack you. Right. And so weakness invites attack. Now, the big picture is, so here's France. When they show weakness, then that emboldens this certain element of Islamists to become even more aggressive. Now, what about the moderate Muslims? Well, guess what? The Islamists hate them too. And they're more than happy to kill a peaceful, friendly Muslim, and then they accuse them of becoming friends with the infidels and having backslidden. So they'll kill a peaceful, friendly Muslim just as quick as they would kill an infidel. And so the Islamists are the ones that think that they're following Muhammad's example the closest, because Muhammad went from being a religious leader to a political leader to a military leader. And so most of the rioting that's going on in Paris is this certain segment of society, but even the news media is afraid to criticize it, right? Yeah. Because they have so bought into, you're not supposed to criticize them. And so the title of that book that I've written is called What Every American Needs to Know About the Quran, A History of Islam in the United States. And it's on my website.
Next time we get you on, I want to go through that a little bit more. We've got about 5 minutes, 10 here now. And I want to segue to something here at the end. That's intriguing stuff. And I do believe that the parallel, though, the danger of that, what you just described, is going on in this nation, too, to a degree, because our media has done the same thing. We're scared to talk about Islam. I'm thinking of these protests. And, Bill, me and we're people of faith. We love people. We don't judge people. We don't condemn people. But past month of June when the LGBTQ community was celebrating this Pride Month, and they were shoving this down Christians' throats and calling Christians bigots and homophobes and every name under the sun if we opposed it. What they don't realize is that the same people that they're putting their arm around in the Islamic world would cut these people's heads off if this was going on in Muslim countries. They don't tolerate this, and it's just the most bizarre thing that the very people that many forces in this country protect are against the very things. And Christians, when I say against, we're not hating the people, but we stand against the sin. We stand against the abomination because we consider that an abomination before God. And the Islamist Muslim community does too. And it's such a convoluted thing. But most of this group supports Islam. They support the Muslims and they think, oh, they're just great people and they're peaceful, loving people. And most of these people, if they were doing this in their countries, would have their heads cut off. It's a weird dynamic. And I do want to go next time we have you on. I want to go down that road with you about the history of Islam. And I'm going to encourage people to get your book. Before we wrap this up tonight, got a quick question. You mentioned to me before the show, you've not seen The Sound of Freedom, but you're going to, correct?
Yes. I'm excited about that.
Yeah. What is your general thoughts on how the media is handling that movie? And it stars Jim Caviezel, the same gentleman. I'm a big fan of his. He's Count of Monte Cristo is one of my all-time favorite movies. He did an excellent job in that. And of course, he starred in The Passion of the Christ too. But let's talk about the subject matter of the movie. It deals with the Tim Ballard, a former agent of the Homeland Security, and he basically is rescuing, these kids from pedophilia and standing against this scourge. How dangerous is this scourge to our country, and if we don't get it under control? Because history would bear out that no empire of the past has ever survived this scourge of pedophilia and homosexuality and corruption in government and no justice system. There's been none that survived, have they not? And I'm speaking to the greatest historian that I know, and I'm assuming that you seeing this firsthand from a front row seat. History does not play well to empires that have allowed this stuff, correct?
Yeah. Lincoln's second inaugural address, which is chiseled in stone on the Lincoln Memorial, he says, both sides read the same Bible, pray to the same God. The prayers both could not be answered. And indeed, the prayers of neither are answered fully. But then he says, if every drop of blood drawn by the bondsman's whip shall be repaid by a drop of blood drawn by the sword, let it be said, the judgments of the Lord are altogether true and righteous. Lincoln had the audacity to connect the sin of slavery with the judgment of the Civil War. And so the connection there is that the sin of mistreating innocent children will be followed by judgment. And you look at ancient Israel. Yeah, they sinned, but the most wickedest sin was sacrificing innocent children, killing them, mutilating them.
Right.
And you have the wicked King Manasseh, and he's in there for 55 years, and they filling the streets of Jerusalem with the blood of these innocents, even his own son. And the prophets come to him and tell him, you're doing the same wicked thing that the Canaanites did before Israel came in, and the Amorites, and sacrificing children to their gods. And the reason I brought Israel in is not because you're a good nation and good people. No, I brought you in to judge them for their sin.
Exactly.
And then because you're doing the exact same thing, I'm going to judge you, Judah, right, and drive you out. And so luckily they had a king named Josiah, the grandson of Manasseh, and he repented when they had the law read to him, and he rips his garments and he sends to a prophetess in town named Huldah, the wife of the king's tailor. And she says, tell the king that judgment's going to come, but not during his lifetime, because he repented. And so he had a big Passover and sent the Levites out to teach the law and tore down these sodomite temples, even some of them that Solomon himself had built at 390 years earlier. And so I'm praying for a Josiah generation right now. But the idea of God is a just God, and there's nothing more unjust than killing an innocent baby that didn't do anything wrong. or lying to little kids, and not just lying to them, but mutilating their bodies.
Bill, that's right.
And then they switch it around. They do this most cruelest thing, but say it's gender affirming care. Like you're caring for them while you're mutilating their bodies. And so this what Jesus said in the beginning, God made a male and female. And yet their tactic is to guilt trip Christians into being more Christian than Christ. So if you're really Christian, you will tolerate them teaching something to these kids that Jesus would never teach to the kids. So if you're really Christian, you won't act like Christ.
Right, buddy.
Yet Jesus said, if you allow one of these little ones that believes in me to stumble, better that a millstone be put on your neck and you be thrown in the depths of the sea. And so all these people that think they're being tolerant and they're silent, they're inviting judgment on themselves.
Yes.
Right? These little children made in God's image, and they're subtly teaching the gospel of Antichrist. What do I mean? Well, they're saying if there is a God, he is messed up, and he's putting men and women's bodies, and you have to have a lifetime of operations, and it's not just a one-time operation. If you read the horrible details of how they attempt to turn a little boy into a little girl, they have to daily do different procedures so the wound doesn't close up. And right, it's horrible, it's painful, and you're condemning them to lifetimes of infections and antibiotics and diapers, and then with the little girls, they give them puberty blockers. Their bones don't get enough calcium, and they get fractures, lots and lots of fractures. And this is this new science, and these little kids, all they want is acceptance from the authority figure and acceptance from their friends. And when you have teachers pushing this, it is something that I believe turns the heart of God. And if the church is silent, what's a just God supposed to do?
Amen.
And if God is silent and not judging, then he would be giving his consent to this.
Exactly right.
And anyway,
I wish we could go on with that. We've got two great topics. Really watch off next time we have you back on, buddy. It's always a pleasure to have you on. One quick question, what you just said about the abortion and the mutilation. I guess you could say the same thing about these pedophiles that are targeting these kids, and many of them sexually abuse them, trafficking them in ways beyond anything we would probably want to even think about as adults. And the horror that these kids have been put through, Bill. But again, the silence of the church is mind-blowing to me. That is more grievous than even the crime itself. And because the silence in the face of evil, I remember hearing you say something in Nashville, if I remember correctly, that our silence and our consent to evil, God is going to hold us accountable more for the consent and silence sometimes than he is even the act, because in our silence and consent, the church has got to be the voice. And we got about 2 minutes, and we got to start being that voice, don't we? And I'll let you wrap us up with the final thought about that. We've got to stop being silent and speak out about these things and let people know these things are happening.
Yeah, there's the sin of commission where you're doing something bad, and there's the sin of omission where you're not doing something that you should do. And I was just reading a psalm last night, and it said that the wicked people seeth evil and abhorreth it not. In other words, they're not bothered by the evil.
Right.
And when I was reading about the thousands of people coming across the border, what they don't highlight is that tens of thousands of the children coming across the border are being lost and pulled into sex trafficking.
Absolutely.
One number that I saw was 85,000, and that the Biden administration is either closing their eyes to this, or are they participating in it? And then some of the stories, if you dig, when the United Nations comes in during refugee programs, a lot of little children get lost. And what happens? They've now, from what I've been told, that sexual trafficking of children is more profitable than drug trafficking.
$150
You
billion
bring
industry.
you bring drugs in, they get used up, but you bring a child in, and then it's a continual sex trafficking of that child all their life. And then when they're used up, they, from what I heard, is they use their bodies for body parts. I mean, it is evil upon evil upon evil. And where's the church? If the church is just bless me, Lord, it's like if you were God, what would you do? And it's one thing if the evil takes place and we don't know about it. A just God cannot hold us accountable for something if we don't know about it. But if we know about it and we're silent, you're giving consent the same way as if there's a wedding ceremony and they're giving vows and you're silent, your silence is giving consent. If there's evil going on and you're silent, you're giving consent. And so, anyway, that's my message for the hour.
Yeah.
And
such a good message. And my friend, I'm going to have you back on. I want to tell you thank you again for your friendship. I encourage people, AmericanMinute.org, to go to his website, and got so much material on there, folks. And look, if you want to get some good reading material and some material that's going to really help your faith and encourage you in the faith, I encourage you to support Bill and his ministry. And we always are grateful for him taking this time out to be with us here on the McFiles. And hope to see you again soon if you're back in these parts. And it was always something I look forward to, and got to meet you, as I said, about a month ago. And it was a pleasure, and enjoyed the ride to the airport with you and our conversation. I appreciate you much, and I hope to see you again soon, my friend. I really do. Bill,
well, God bless you, and look forward to the next time.
Folks, we'll be right back. Thank you, Bill.
All right.
That is one of the good guys right there, and we're grateful for him. You can open the chat back up now, and we're going to come back over here and talk to you a little bit about that tonight. What a good interview with him. I know it's a lot of history. I love this stuff. I could have sat there and listened to him for 2 more hours. We don't have 2 more hours. It's ironic, him talking about what happened in France, what is happening in France, and it's staring us right here in the face. It's happening here in America. The media just ain't reporting it. But next time that we have Bill, we're going to look at the history of Islam. It's it's not by mistake that you don't hear much about Islam anymore in the news. They have quelched that narrative down to the point that we hardly even hear about it. But if you follow any conservative news agencies over in Israel and the Middle East, these attacks on Jewish cities, settlers, people, citizens, and threats that are actually being aired, but we're not hearing about them, are still going on. And I want to just remind everybody, on 9/11 of 2001, some of us have forgotten it, some of us haven't. I'll never forget it. I remember that time very well, and I remember talking and reading behind several Middle East experts, and they have predicted over the last decade that there's another one coming. Probably it's not a matter of if, but when. And the thing about the jihadists, they wait. They don't care. They don't care if it's 30 years. They don't care if it's 20 years, because they'll plan these things forever. 9/11 was planned decades probably before they even did it. And it's evident that there was planning. And by the way, I don't want any of this garbage in the chat room about the conspiracy behind 9/11. You can believe what you want to believe, folks. We had 2 planes hit the freaking World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and 3,000 people lost their lives. That's what I know is true. And all this other stuff is just noise to me. It frustrates me. It burns me up that people shatter the memory and shame the memory of those lost in that tragedy. And our real enemy is Islam. But we've tried to make the great boogeyman America. And anyway, and I know there'll be a voice or two out there tonight. Well, Chris is just so naive. Yeah, okay, call me whatever you want to call me. 3,000 people died that day, and it will happen again. It will happen again. But what he was trying to get across tonight, I didn't want to get off that topic. That would have got my feathers ruffled and ruined a perfectly good show tonight. So I don't want to go there right now. But I'm using 9/11 as an example to talk about this threat that is still in play tonight. But the bigger picture threat is what Bill was trying to share with you, what happened in France, that when this revolution took place, our revolution was to free America to worship God. France's revolution was a revolution to eradicate God from their landscape. And they turned to Napoleon Bonaparte as their savior when all the chaos descended. And as he was talking about, when a democracy descends into chaos, then people start looking for a savior to get them out of that chaos. I cannot help but believe that that is exactly what we're doing tonight. We've been doing it for a long time. We're looking for a grand savior to appear on our political scene to save us from the great big boogeyman. And folks, I will tell you tonight, no great big savior's coming. Not a human person like you think is coming. There is a savior coming. His name is Jesus Christ tonight. It ain't going to be a politician, I can tell you that. But before Christ comes back, that very narrative I just spoke about, the democracies of the world in chaos looking for a savior, that is setting the stage, and Bill even called it the religion of Antichrist. That's the spirit of Antichrist that is working the earth tonight, that is working the earth. And it is getting the nations of the world ready for the advent of the man of sin. You've got voices in the church don't believe a man of sin exists. They don't think it's going to happen. You've got some that are just totally deny that. You've got some that blow that off, make fun of that, mock that, call people that say that's going to happen, because I will tell you it is going to happen, because the Word of God says it's going to happen, as being negative and doom and gloomers and all sorts of other names. Well, you call us what you want to call us. It wasn't raining until Noah built the ark, and when the rain started, the rush for the door did start. Don't wait for judgment to give the Lord your heart. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. And you may not see the judgment happening tonight. It doesn't mean it ain't coming. You may see a pause. You may be seeing things that give you false hope, and you may be hearing things tonight that are giving you false hope. There's nothing worse than that. And sadly, a lot of that's coming from church circles, and a lot of that's coming from prophetic movements and pseudo-Christian movements that are posing as rallies and tours, reawakening a tour of America. Folks, America's not going to be reawakened by a convention in Las Vegas. America is going to be reawakening by revival. It starts with us, it starts with the church, but it has to come back to gospel preaching. It comes back to the voice of the church, and the silence of the church is deafening. You've got Christians, and I was telling Bill about this, and we didn't talk about it publicly. I'm going to let him see the movie. We're going to come back together and talk about this in August. But he could not believe when I said, you realize you got Christian voices out there that are speaking out against this movie that Cavill and Tim Ballard made about the pedophilia. And he said, I find that hard to believe. And I said, I find it hard to believe, too, that people would be that stupid. But I said, I've learned to not underestimate the stupidity of stupid people, because there's people more concerned whether the boogeyman behind the movie is evil instead of the pedophiles that it's trying to expose. And you've got people on campaigns tonight on their YouTube channels trying to convince you all that all this is, you can't trust anything you're seeing on this film because all the people behind it are boogeymen. Well, let me tell you who the real boogeymen are, folks. It's the pedophiles. The real boogeymen are the people exploiting and sexually abusing and trafficking and raping kids. Let me say that again. The real evil tonight are those trafficking and raping and abusing kids and selling their body parts. You realize, folks, 800,000 children go missing a year. I heard that today, and I did a little search, and you cannot even fathom the number of websites that totally blow that off, deny that it's even true, make fun of that figure, mock it. They mock that figure. They don't believe that's true. 800,000 a year worldwide go missing, and most of those, we read you the figures Tuesday night on our show. We had people get mad at us Tuesday night, folks. You know why they got mad at us? Because we simply said that we believe that A Sound of Freedom was a good movie to go see. because it exposed the pedophilia. Because they got their little Q hat on and they got their little nonsensical, moronic, imbecilic hats on, trying to spook the people about the quote-unquote boogeyman behind the movie instead of warning you about the truth that the movie's trying to expose. And we wonder. And then the real hypocrisy kicks in. We wonder why the nation's in the condition it's in. And we just gasp, oh, I can't believe things are so bad. I can't believe that the country is in the morass it's in. I can. Because I watch stupidity paraded on YouTube channels and Instagram pages every day in the name of God. And people that should know better put stuff out there, folks, and they lie. They just lie. And we don't address the evil. And it's like Bill said, folks, that's a sin of omission. That is a greater sin, the silence in the face of evil. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, we that stand silent in the face of evil will be held accountable just as those doing the evil. It's a real scourge on our nation. It's a scourge on this world. $150 billion industry. Folks, that's mind-blowing. That's mind-blowing. That's more than drugs. Drugs in this country, basically 1 to 2 billion a year. That's bad. Alcoholism, probably another billion or so, hundreds of millions. Industry, porn industry is probably another 3 to 4 billion. That's peanuts. That's peanuts compared to trafficking, child sexual abuse, pedophilia, raping, kidnapping, and the murderous destruction of these kids. Because when they use these kids, folks, and they get quote-unquote worthless to have their sexual fantasies with anymore, they take their body parts and they sell them on the open market. That's not QAnon conspiracy, folks. That's just plain out facts. It's facts. It's facts. But what do we concern ourselves with? We concern ourselves with whether the producer of The Sound of Freedom is some secret CIA boogeyman running around pushing some agenda. Instead of looking at the movie, watching the movie, and realizing the evil that they're trying to portray and trying to get our attention to is really what we should be focusing on, not our own little sick agenda and our little narcissism and our little, we got to let everybody look at us and hear us talk and hear us with our blather. The Bible says a fool utters foolishness, and a prating fool spews out foolishness. And that's what these people are that are doing that tonight. They're prating fools. And it frustrates me. And I hear the sound of a country that's losing its way with God. I hear these things, and I hear the cries of these children. Bill said it tonight. Israel lost her way with God, and whenever she lost her way with God, she turned to child mutilation. She turned to child sacrifice. She turned to killing the babies. I don't know if you called it what he said, folks. Those homosexual temples that Manasseh was worshiping under were built by Solomon. Some of them, Solomon, in all of his vaunted wisdom, he left God, turned on God at the end, lost his way with God, and allowed his wives to build those homosexual deities and temples where they were sacrificing these kids. That was under David's son. And had it not been for Josiah, which was Manasseh's grandson, Israel would have probably been totally destroyed. But there was a revival under Josiah. And we may talk about that revival on an upcoming Sunday morning meeting time program, because it's the reform that Josiah did that we need to come back to in this nation. Do you know what he did? He removed the sodomite influence out of the land. And God blessed him for it. And he had the Passover, and he brought justice. He brought true justice back to Israel, and he stopped the mutilation of the babies that his grandfather had been embracing, and you heard Bill talk about that tonight. That's how nations are de-Christianized. That's how nations are destroyed. That's how nations are ripped to pieces. 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 All right. Now, thank you, Cleo. Proverbs 15:2. The tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of fools pours forth foolishness. Foolishness. That's exactly right. If you got a question in the chat room tonight, if you got a statement about the show tonight, I'm going to give you about 10 minutes, and I'm going to be out of here tonight. Did you enjoy Bill Federer? Did you enjoy Bill Federer? I sure did. I sure did. Good to see everybody over on Facebook as well tonight. Good to see our Facebook audience. Luke 17:2. It was better for him that a millstone were hung about his neck and be cast into the sea than he should offend one of these little ones. That he should offend one of these little ones. You got a statement? Comment? Got a lot of fire in the house tonight. That's good. Anything? Any comments? Any questions? I'm opening up the chat room real quick for about 10 minutes, folks. 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes. Good to see Miss Emily Courtney in the house. Good to see her tonight. All our moderators, good to see you guys. Amber James is out there. Good to see. We got a good audience on the E-Network tonight. Got a good audience tonight. Good. We're going to do more shows on this subject in the coming weeks and months. We're going to be doing a lot of discussion about this very thing. We've got some things in the works that are coming. We're praying will come into fruition. We're working on guests, and we're gonna address this head on. The Lord dealt with my heart strongly this week that it's time that we do that. We've been doing it sort of at times, but we've not made it a priority. It's going to be a priority of the McFiles the rest of the summer into the fall. And we're going to do as much as we can to bring this subject to the forefront of the discussion. And as I said, we got some feelers out with some folks that we hope will say yes. And we'll let you know. We'll let you know when that takes place. And but listen, we're trying our best to do what we can. But anyway, God's children are not for sale. Wendy McLeod, I like that. I like that. They are not for sale, Wendy. I like that a lot. Curtis Astrop, I'm a history buff, and I enjoyed this show. I did too, Curtis. I did too, man. It's good stuff, wasn't it? If you learned something tonight you didn't know, why don't we do that? That'll give us a good topic of conversation. Put something in the house. Carol Smith says, if the amount of lives lost in wars, genocide is staggering, I can't even guess. It is, Carol. That's a great point. Sheila says, if Jesus wasn't a threat to Muslim religion, then why do they have people who were Christians deny Jesus as the Son of God? Well, Sheila, that's a good question. He is a threat. People deny their faith. Look, there's a lot of people that were Christians that have gone into the Muslim faith. And it's just a sign of the times we're in. It's a good question. I don't think we can ever really answer that totally. We don't know people's hearts, but that influence is out there. The influence of Islam is still real tonight, folks, and it's not going away. It's been repackaged. I'll give you that. It's repackaged, and it's been it's been presented to us in a manner that it don't make us feel as nervous about it, and we don't make us feel as danger about it. Bill, I think, mentioned it. You know, the moderate Muslims, it's the only thing, and I didn't really disagree with that, but I got a slightly different take on that. I do not believe that there's anything known. I don't think there's anything called a moderate Muslim. They're all Muslims. There's no such thing. What there are people that are bad Muslims. And I heard this expressed by Mark Gabriel, who wrote a great book about Islam and Jesus many years ago, probably almost 15, 16 years ago now. And he made a statement in his book that has stuck with me. And he said this. He said, because he was talking about this very thing about moderate Muslims. And he said, the only Muslims that are not out there being jihadists are bad Muslims, because the Quran commands the Muslims to kill the infidels. And if the Muslims obeyed their holy book, we'd be in trouble. And the Muslims that are quote unquote peaceful, which I don't believe they're that either, are bad Muslims. And you better be grateful for bad Muslims. That's the bad Muslims in the view of the Quran. The Quran tells them to kill the infidels, cut their heads off. And by the way, if you're a Christian or American or a Jew, you're the infidel tonight. That is their command in their book. Now, there's not one mention of love in the Quran. Do we hate Muslims? No, absolutely not. God forbid. We do not. Their religion, though, is based upon lies, and it's based upon a demonic narrative. And it has sought to eradicate Christianity and the Jewish race from the planet. It's an ancient hatred spoken of in Ezekiel 35. We've not spoke about this in a long time. And it's going to get more pronounced as we get closer to the coming of the Lord. And the bloodshed on this earth is going to be enormous in these last days because of it. It's already enormous. We just, again, don't hear about it as much. They've repackaged the deal. But it's still out there, and that threat is still out there tonight. The Muslims will eventually come back to God at some point in the Great Tribulation, or they'll perish one way or the other, just like Israel. Israel will accept Christ or die, and Israel will accept their Messiah, but the Muslims there will be many that will come to Christ as well. Many are already coming to Christ. He's appearing to many Muslims tonight. But no, we don't hate Muslims. We love Muslims, and if you're a Muslim listening to us tonight, I can tell you right now, your religion, there's no mention of love. But our God, the God of Jehovah, the God Jehovah of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, He is love. He just don't have love. He is love. And He extended His love to you like He did me, that through His Son, Jesus Christ, who died on that cross 2,000 years ago, that all men might be saved, if they will but believe, if they will but come to Him, confess their sin, repent of their sins, turn from their sins, ask Him for forgiveness, put their faith and hope and trust in what He did for them. Whether it's Muslim, Jew, Christian, white, black, American, Hispanic, Asian, whatever the nationality, gender, whatever, He can set the captive free tonight. It is ironic to me that all these false religions, including Islam, started with a so-called angel visitation. We're going to be dealing with that soon. I saw a video today by Doreen Bircha, basically addressing the Greg Locke situation of his hideous movie, and it was a very telling video. We may even play it tomorrow night if I'm on. We're going to have a time. We'll have a phone interview, I think, with Chris Ann Hall. We're not sure how long that's going to last, but I heard that interview today, and I was like, way to go, Doreen. Way to go, Doreen. She's a former New Ager, by the way, folks. It's a shame that the former New Agers have more discernment than most Christians. Former New Agers can see through this stuff like a crystal ball, pardon the pun. And I swear, most Christians, they just eat all this stuff up. They just eat this stuff up like it's cotton candy. And then somebody comes along from the New Age and says, that's New Age humanism. What they're doing is dangerous. What they're doing is adding to the Word of God. What they're doing, this DNA, she addresses the DNA generational curse thing today. It's all New Age humanism. It's New Age demonic theology. Thank you, Doreen Bircha. I wish most preachers would have that same kind of common sense, and most Christians would have that same kind of common sense to recognize that it was. Because I've been saying it all along, it has been. I didn't need Doreen Bircha to confirm that, but it was good that somebody else saw it. But anyway, anyway, I'm a little fired up. A little fired up tonight. All righty, did you enjoy Mr. Bill Federer? I sure did. And we are glad that y'all are with us tonight. And good to see all our Facebook family over there tonight as well. Proverbs, I like that verse, Cleo. Thank you so much. It's a good one to remember. Proverbs 15:2, the tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of fools pour out foolishness, folks. Pour out foolishness. These people that are saying this stuff that is abhorrently evil are far worse to me than even the pedophiles, because they are basically stopping the efforts and hindering the efforts to go after the real evil, because they're making up evil in their foolish, pathetic, distorted minds tonight because they want to be seen or heard. and they want to get followers. And it's a terrible shame. But again, the prating words of a fool pour out foolishness. They pour out foolishness. The righteous spew out godly knowledge. Never forget that. All right. That's my 1 hour and 15-minute Thursday night McFiles for you. We'll lose a few more on this one tonight, but that's all right. We've been losing a lot lately. I'm just glad when I turn the camera on and I look at that counter, I see 2 out there. I'm making progress. We're good. I will see you tomorrow, Lord willing. And the creek don't rise on a Friday night. And until then, McDonald out. If something changes, we'll let you know on Facebook. Listen, God bless you. God bless your families. God bless this great nation of America. Give the world a smile as we go out of here tonight, and I'll see you tomorrow. Be blessed tonight. If you enjoyed Bill Federer, put some fire in that house. And we love you tonight. We truly do. And fight for your country, folks. Please fight for your country. Please fight for your country. Good night.
Give the world a smile each day.
Bright smile every day.
Helping someone on life's way.
On life's true way.
From the paths of sin, bring the wonders into the Master's fold to stay.
Forever to stay.
Help to cheer the lone and sad.
Lone and sad.
Help to make some pilgrim glad.
Make somebody glad.
Let your light so be that all the world may see the joy of serving Jesus with a smile. Are you giving to the world a smile? Help and lessen someone's weary mile. Do you greet the world with song as through life you pass along, cheering those you meet along life's way? Well, give the world a smile each day.
Bright smile every day.
Helping someone on life's way.
On life's true way.
From the paths of sin, bring the wonders into the Master's fold to stay.
Forever to stay.
Help to cheer the lone and sad.
The lonely and sad.
Help to make some pilgrim glad.
Make somebody glad.
Let your light so be that all the world may see the joy of serving Jesus with a smile.